and the relationship between these two is just with a scalar quantity, which is imaginary, and is actually real, with a real part in absence of losses. If the elements are a little bit more complex, like element with a cut like that, you need an additional feature, the relationship between the electric field and magnetic field, the jump of the magnetic field is tensorial, but nothing changed from the physics point of view. If indeed you have more than one layer, or you have vertical inclusions into the structure, you can actually have also a discontinuity of magnetic fields, provided that the overall structure is very thin in terms of the wavelength. You have an average electric field from one side to the other that is proportional to the discontinuity of magnetic field, vice versa. And this structure can be realized by, for instance, a triplet of metasurface, infinitesimal thin metasurface coupled together, and the overall effect can be described in a homogenized sense this way. Now, this things is very important in order to increase the degrees of freedom, because in this particular structure you can match an arbitrary, almost arbitrary incident field, and going on the other side with an arbitrary distribution of phase. Concerning with the amplitude in these things are a little bit more complex, but at least the phase you can construct in almost in arbitrary sense by using this triplet. This is something that around which several authors worked on. Let me subdivide the overall phenomena in space wave transformation. So from one side to the other, the field change, and on the other side, you can have an arbitrary beam, a tilted beam, and different polarization or whatever, or surface wave modification, surface wave transformation, which in turn can be divided in two different branch of activity. One is about the control and propagation path in order to implement the transformation optics in a planar sense, and the other one is whenever the modulation of the metasurface is along the direction of propagation, or it has a component along the direction of propagation of the periodicity, and in this case, actually you can have a transition to liquid waves directly, and the entire antenna for the surface, metasurface, is itself an antenna. We will focus this talk about this transition and the possibility to create antenna directly using this phenomenon. The outline of presentation, I will do an introduction on metasurface, and next the multi-scale design process that we use in order to improve the design of simple broadside beam antenna, and high-performance antennas, which include multi-beam, multi-frequency, dual mode, dual polarization, horns, error configurability by tunable materials. Concerning with the basic issue, you can follow the basic structure of antenna like that. There is a monopole at the center. The monopole launches a transverse magnetic cylindrical surface wave over the structure, and the surface wave run over a sort of average impedance, which is this, around which the element itself that has monitors to the wavelength create a modulation of impedance. This modulation of impedance interacts with the surface wave, and the surface wave run with according with this dispersion equation, and for a certain frequency you have a certain beta, and when the lambda of the surface wave 2 pi over beta match the periodicity, you can get a broadside radiation. This expression could be generalized in terms of a local interaction, also if you have a arbitrary curvilinear modulation. The modulation is created by changing the dimension of the element, and you can see the orography probably by the effect of this variation. and also by moving and rotating the element in order to control the polarization. So you can control the polarization with the rotation of the element, the modulation with the dimension of the element, being the period equal, and the alpha with the actually dimension of the modulation. If the modulation is stronger, the alpha and the local alpha is higher for this antenna. Let me remark also the fact that the control of alpha allows some basic difference with respect to reflector array. In fact, the reflector array, you actually control the phase, essentially. While with the metasurface antenna, you can also control the amplitude of the aperture field. The amplitude of the aperture field in the reflector array could be controlled just with the feed. You cannot do it with the element because it's impenetrable. Here, indeed, you can control the alpha point by point in 2 dimensions. And this is the only structure that allows a transition from surface to leak in 2 dimensions, not only in 1 dimension as usual. Actually, there is another obvious advantage about the fact that the monopole creates a flat antenna. Everything is flat. While in the reflector array you have the orbit outside, the feed outside, and this creates more volume into the structure. And the elements are obviously resonant, so larger than the one of the metasurface antenna. So these are the main differences, and actually, in any case, we can take benefits from the design process of the reflector array, especially as concerned with the local periodicity assumption, which we use in order to extract the parameter of the metasurface. Concerning with the polarization, it is just sufficient to have an additional parameter to play with, and we use always elements that possess 2 axes of symmetry, because this creates some advantages in the tensor, and I'm sorry, and the various elements have different properties, but all of them create a misalignment in the TM wave from the E field to the K vector. That means that the rotation of it can control the -1 component of the field and in terms of polarization. This allows you to make the streak. If you got a spiral antenna constructed by uniform metasurface, you get a certain efficiency of the aperture, but if you accompany this structure with the rotation of the element, you actually reduce much the cross-polar components and increase the directivity automatically. So this is the first way to increase the efficiency of an antenna. And this is just designing anisotropic shift, moving from isotropic to anisotropic metasurface. You can get it. Concerning the efficiency, this is one of the points, how this antenna should be efficient. And so if you illuminate with just a monopole, you get, you should think to have a most uniform aperture as possible. This means that whenever you get a plane wave incident from down, all the energy goes into the feed, despite the fact that there is a background plane. So you should collect all the energy in the feed point. This is a very important aspect because with other type of antenna like texture array, you can control this phenomenon as well. And in this case, it's a little bit more difficult, but still possible during the time when we increase our efficiency from this rudimental prototype of 15% of efficiency to today of 80% of efficiency for the last antenna 40 dB gain. And this is done by using actually design, increasing and improving the design of these antennas. And in order to understand better how to do, you can think to excite the dipole, the monopole, with a certain power. And the balance of power is include the additional power directly in the free space, the P field here, And part of the energy is going to the surface wave radiate, part of the surface wave diffract at the end, and create a back wave on other back Ricci wave and diffractor field in the free space. All these phenomena in blue and green are undesired. Actually, we need the perfect conversion from Ricci wave to surface wave, and also a perfect conversion of the input impedances to the surface wave. So we can define three types of efficiency: the feed efficiency as the ratio between the power in the surface wave and the power input, the conversion efficiency, this quantity over this quantity, Ricci wave over surface wave, and the aperture tapering efficiency, which is actually defined in the usual way. When the aperture is uniform, the efficiency of aperture is 1, and when the decreases when it is tapered. Actually, they are an additional efficiency, which is due to the ohmic losses, and this is the relation between the Ricci wave in ideal structure over the structure affected by the losses, and you get the overall efficiency, which is the product of these 4 terms here. The most important ones are these 2. You can, and this third one depends much by the how you do the feed. So the feed is very important, and this other 2 depends on how you do the surface. Whenever you, just for having an idea, if you have no modulation for the surface, all the power goes into the surface wave diffract everything, and the conversion efficiency is 0 because you don't convert anything in terms of radiation. While if you get a modulation, you introduce an exponential attenuation, you get a diffraction, your Epsilon tapering decreases, the conversion efficiency increases, but actually you should have a trade-off for these 2 quantities in order to maximize the aperture efficiency. And if you do it just using a uniform modulation, since you don't have any degrees of freedom in managing the attenuation constant, your design is very, let us say, difficult to be adjusted. And actually, the only thing that you can do is positioning into the maximum of the product, tapering efficient conversion efficiency, and this maximum cannot be more than 58% mathematically. And it's a red result. You notice here that the behavior is quite similar to that of reflector antennas. The aperture efficiency, the tapering efficiency decreases with the increasing radius of the antenna, and the tapering efficiency and the conversion efficiency play the same role of the spillover efficiency in reflector antenna, and increases, and the maximum get 58%. Actually, whenever you indeed change the design, and in place of having uniform modulation, you change the modulation to smaller moderation to the larger one, and next you go to 0 again. Actually, what you do is you can optimize the profile in such a way that you get a flat aperture distribution of the -1 mode, and the aperture field goes very rapidly to 0. In order to do it, you have to modulate a lot, but you should have the possibility to do it with your elements. And if you, let us say, fix a certain peak of alpha that you can realize, actually you can optimize the profile in such a way that the aperture is almost uniform. At the end, you get an expression of the product, the tapering for conversion efficiency, which is something like that. A is the radius of the antenna, lambda is the wavelength of the free space. You have A over A over wavelength plus 2. So whenever you increase the dimension of the antenna, your product aperture efficiency could go to unity. And this is something that you can get only with a different modulation. So you have to introduce a slope into the process. If you increase a lot, actually the ohmic losses increases also because of the length, and actually you get a sort of decreasing, and so the formula before is not anymore valid when you introduce also the ohmic efficiency. This is an example, a practical example of an antenna of 29 dB with uniform modulation, and we get here 35% of aperture efficiency at 8.35 gigahertz. These are done some years ago for SATCOM application. You have two type of antenna, one for transmission, the other for reception, and you get two different feeds, two different dimensions of the element, but actually the antenna should come together, and the cross coupling of this is very, very small, like minus 55 dB, if I remember well. If you actually do the modulation, indeed, you increase. This is another antenna we fabricated more recently. The directivity was 39 dB with a gain of 36 at 29.6 gigahertz. Again, the couple is done for Ka band satellite communication, and the number of elements in this case are 45,000. So imagine the 45,000 element like that, but the aperture efficiency was 70% with 3 dB losses over 40 wavelength antenna, so it's a very big antenna. Now, if you actually more recently we got over 37 dB gain and 39 dB with 70% of efficiency, and with this element in decreasing the epsilon r. This is another example, and in this plot you compare, you see the comparison between, for this type of antenna, measurement and the this is the homogenized impedance versus the fast multiple method analysis element by element, and you see that the homogenized impedance model works very well, and then these are indeed the comparison between the measurement and the homogenized model, which is actually very good, very all right. Okay, so recently we got an antenna for 40 dB gain, 41.3 directivity, so only 1.3 dB losses into the structure, and these are the radiation pattern measured by this guy Gabriele, which is very proud about his design. And if you look at the pattern, seems quite similar to what you can obtain by a reflector antenna. It's a big chiplet. It's a 40 dB gain antenna, 40 dB gain, not directivity gain, measured gain. And actually, the problem is how large is the bandwidth of this antenna when you increase the gain at this level. And this is actually one of the main questions that arises when you talk about metamaterial. Actually, the element of sub-resonance, they're never going to the resonance in these models. So this is a sort of advantage, especially the bandwidth. However, you should always have a sort of synchronism between the wavelength of the surface wave and the periodicity. So when you change the frequency, the dispersion effect of the surface wave, you get a difference in between these two, and this created a bifurcation, a sort of conical beam that decreases the gain automatically. So it is possible, this phenomenon is clearly associated with the group velocity of the surface wave, and the final formula that you can get is that the bandwidth is equal to, for uniform modulation, almost 1 times group velocity over c. C is the speed of light, so the group velocity divided by the speed of light, 1 over the radius in terms of wavelength, which is always less than 1 over a over wavelength. So it is a very simple formula that you can remember well. The relative bandwidth, so the delta omega over omega 0, is always less than the inverse of the radius in terms of wavelength. You cannot do much more than this. You cannot do more than this. You can approach these when you design your group velocity as close as possible to C. Concerning with uniform modulation, the constant in front is likely changed in this optimized version, but actually what is changed much is the product bandwidth gain. So the product bandwidth gain for the uniform modulation is 22, is always less than 22 a wavelength, and the product bandwidth gain for non-uniform modulation is always less than 50A wavelength. And this can also be applied in terms of the gain versus bandwidth in order to establish a physical bound for the gain versus bandwidth for this type of data. This physical bound, when you compare it with corporate feed array, is quite good. So you can have almost the same performance of what you can get in terms of bandwidth with large array of 40 dB gain, for instance, when you use a single state. If you increase the number of states, the patch array could have a better bandwidth, obviously, but we never try what happened in this antenna when you make a multi-strate. And because it's quite difficult to design, I think this is a perspective of making multi-level, multi-strate antenna. Okay, these are the checking with the Fourier analysis, so the simple formula that we have seen, and the checking with the measurement that works very well. Till now, I'm talking about uniform period. So the period is uniform, the modulation, the amplitude changes. What happens indeed if you change the period along? You can beat the limit that we have seen before. So you can, moving gradually, if you, for instance, change the periodicity from small periodicity to large periodicity toward the external periphery, you actually can match the wavelength in different regions of the antenna. So when the frequency change, you have a sort of active region. It's not an active region in the sense of the spiral antenna, for instance, but is always an antenna that works in the conversion between surface wave and decay wave, but in a gradual sense. Changes this, you can obtain a very large bandwidth, but the price that you have to pay is the efficiency. You can decrease the efficiency. And you can see it in the next slide. Yes. Here we have designed an antenna. This guy did it, Marco, is almost flat in gain, but the efficiency is 10% over a huge bandwidth. You can do it. You can play with the periodicity. So if you increase the gain, you decrease the bandwidth. If you want to have a big bandwidth, you have to accomplish about low gain, but much larger than the one that you get in the spiral antenna. Another important thing, when you go up in frequency, actually you have to come back to the losses, and the losses are mainly dominated by the dielectric. If you would like, if you can eliminate the dielectric, you have a big advantage, and this is especially important for the antenna that's aboard the satellite. So the trick in order to do it is to substitute the printed patch with pillars with a small pin with elliptical cross section. The spin has a common interface. So the interface with respect to the free space is flat, but the small pillars are placed over a step of the ground plane in such a way that you can regulate the height and play with this height. You can modulate the impedance and reuse in practice the same type of project design things that I've shown before, and you can get the radiation of it with the control of polarization. This is very good because it can be also printed by 3D printers, and there's a big advantage today. These are the beamforming network that was designed by David Gonzalez and Ren, and these are the final measurements that are quite good. This solution, technological solution, can be scaled up to 300 gigahertz. These are the design done in JPL in cooperation with JPL at 300 gigahertz by David. The numerical results show the same difference between isotropic and isotropic. In the anisotropic case, you get a much higher efficiency, but they have pronounced nanosatellite for CubeSat, for sensor in CubeSat. And these are the design done by the fabrication done in JPL. Now, what about the multi-scale design process? So if you would like to design a shaded beam, for instance, or you can control multi-beams or doing something like that, more sophisticated performance for your antenna, actually you should go into a design process which is quite complex. The most simple, let us say, complication is tilting the beam. Tilting the beam can be done by changing the orography from a spiral into an elliptical spiral, and actually this allows you to reuse the conceptual aspect of the physics, just making the global interaction in terms of local interaction of a cylindrical wave with rectilinear modulation. And this allows to use sort of canonical problems that match the local structure, and from which we can extract the parameter of local alpha and local beta. So actually you can control local alpha and local beta just by this. And this is not only about for elliptical. You can change the orography and change the local modulation and change the local alpha and local beta at your will, with certain limitation, but with a lot of degrees of freedom. So actually you can design the sheet impedance over down the slab, so this is sheet impedance here, in terms of this variable modulation and the fast varying contribution of the modulation phase and the slow varying contribution that actually get the control of the polarization. This one controls the fine-tuning of beta over the average, and this controls the alpha of a rho. So with this, you control the several parameters, but most important thing is that you can define global modes with that. So with the use of the local rectilinear modes, you can construct global modes that run over the surface. So you have actually zero mode. This is what happened for the tilted beam antenna. You have a zero mode, which is quite similar to zero mode in terms of the current. So the current of the antenna over zero mode, which are quite similar of the current associated with the surface wave that run over the average surface. Next, you have the -1 mode, which is the one that you use for radiation, and that has a spectrum which is concentrated in the spot beam here, and the mode +1. So this is the space, and this is the spectrum. You see that the spectrum is very regular. So you get a spectrum here, which is outside of the visible region. Visible region is in white here. Since this is very similar to the surface wave, this spot is outside the visible region, so you don't see it when you get into the far field. What you see is only the -1 mode, and this other +1 mode again is structure like that. If you get into some very tilted beam, what can happen is the -2 mode have a portion inside the visible region. This creates some lateral loss, and you have to check and control it when you get the antenna design. And next, the +2 mode never does any problem. So you should control the -2 mode. But the beauty of this approach is not the fact that you get some physics inside, and you can use this mode as a characteristic mode inside the method of moments and check it and couple it with a true feed. And so the coupling coefficient of the modes with feed will be calculated by imposing the integral equation in terms of homogenized boundary conditions. This is what we are doing now, and actually, if you compare this all these modes, you can see the trace, and -2 modes is the only one that may be your problem. But if you think to have a modulated beam, you have to control carefully all these modes that are given in closed form. So all these modes are given in closed form if you make the homogenized approach. Actually, if you would like at the end to schematize the problem in terms of the multi-scale, this is a big antenna, like 40 wavelength. Each element is of the order of lambda over 10, sometimes less, but in the range of lambda over 5 or lambda over 10. And each element normally should be discretized in the method of moment with elements of lambda over 100. So you should start from 30 wavelength or more, 40 wavelength, from 40 wavelength to lambda over 100. So it's an extremely huge range that creates normally instability in your method of moment. So problem of inversion. So you have to use the trick to study this antenna with the method of moment. The minimum dimension, lambda over 10, normally is discretized by Raoult-Wilson basis function, but we never use this Raoult-Wilson basis function in order to study all the problem, because we will go into million unknown problems. This is a sketch that you can have for a complex antenna. So what we can do is in the mesoscale, which is the scale actually of the global modulation, we use the homogenization approach. And the homogenization approach is given in terms of a closed form adiabatic modes, but these are only valid for elementary sources. But we use the same mode inside the method of moment, homogenized method of moment with a true source, with a true field, because otherwise we should not be able to estimate the efficiency of the field, which is a quite important parameter. If you look in this atomic scale, we use the Raoult-Wilson function, but only in order to extract the local parameter. So in a periodicity environment, and as you know, the periodicity environment allows you to make a very fast calculation, and this in order to construct a database on which to fish out the impedance that we wish. And the molecular scale is intended on grouping Raoult-Wilson basis function into synthetic function. So you group it on the use of the periodicity assumption, you get into into synthetic function, and you go into the macro scale by using a fast multiple method. All this software has been constructed by ourselves. Nothing is done by conventional general purpose software, because when you go into this dimension, they're almost useless. They are very useful when you go from, for example, CST or FICO or other software are extremely useful in the range of wavelength that goes from, let us say, 5 wavelength or less into the 20 wavelength. But when you overcome 20 wavelength, you would like to have a 40 wavelength antenna, and you design it, you cannot do it with a general purpose for software. And you need something which is constructed purposely with this technique. So if you look at this global feature, you have an objective electrical field, you get into the adiabatic mode synthesis, you check with the characteristic mode done with the characteristic test function. It's a few minutes, it's a few seconds, it's almost close to 4, but does not include the feed. This is the few minutes, and then next you go, after designing the antenna, into a database which is constructed with several elements, and you decide which is the element, etc. And finally, you can check with the synthetic function plus fast multiple method. This is the overall design process, and this allows you to make some antenna that go like that. This is the profile of an antenna that is used for download from the low orbit satellite. The satellite needs to illuminate the Earth, the surface of the Earth with the same power density, and this gets you a profile like that, and you can gain the other dimension by rotating the antenna. So the antenna is connected with a rotation system, but the single -1 mode has a pattern like that. And this is the one that we have designed. This is a comparison between this method and the complete method moment web analysis done by two different persons. No, sorry. This is the adiabatic mode done by an elementary dipole, so for with respect to the characteristic mode using the homogenized approach. The comparison is quite good, and actually this is indeed the comparison with respect to the measurement. The measurements are not quite good here. At the beginning, we believe this is a UV plane. We believe at the beginning that was due to the fact that the surface was not perfectly flat. There was a little bit not flat, but actually it was not there. The reason was for the mode -2. So actually there is an imbalance of the feed, but the feed should be perfectly balanced. Was not just a single dipole in this case, but was a waveguide with two ports calibrated. If you have a certain symmetry in between the two ports, the modes couple more to the -2 mode to the first mode and create this problem here. And actually now we are trying to perfectionate the design and the fabrication of the feed. Actually, here indeed you make the modeling. The modeling is done of the extraction of the parameter with the database. The database is constructed by using a periodicity approach and the periodic rings function for the method moment. This is something that you can also use some trick for the formation, the zoom of the element in order to speed up the construction of the database. And actually you get, we have constructed for now database for this particular element, also because we would like to compare the performance of the element in the various cases. And this table was required by the European Space Agency in order to clarify which are the benefits or the difficulties of the various elements in terms of anisotropic control, range of the average bandwidth, sensitivity to the tolerances, and loss in the materials. Now, with this method, you can do a little bit better than what we have done until now. For instance, sharing aperture for dual beam. So the idea is to superimpose the two surfaces and get the two beam with a single point source or with a couple of point source. This is extremely useful for several applications. You can do it obviously also partitioning the aperture, so attributing one piece of the aperture to one beam, but this reduces much the efficiency of the aperture, and mostly it introduces some cross polar level lobes and also lateral lobes that are not compliant with some requirement. And here indeed you get, the superposition of the aperture that clean up very much the beam. So what you do is actually you design one beam, an impedance, design the other beam, you superimpose the impedance mathematically. This is the basic issue. Next, you need some optimization, and you get the beam for each point source, and it works quite well. The problem is that you cannot reach the level of aperture efficiency for the single beam of the previous case because there is a certain coupling of the beam, but for sure with respect to this rudimental approach in which you share the aperture is much better, and you can also do it by using different point sources, and actually this is much more useful because you excite one beam with each point source. With this, you excite a beam in this direction, with this in this direction, this in this direction, etc. So for each beam, for each point source, you design a beam. These are some experimental validation done by David Gonzalez, and here you see a couple of beams with a single point source. Here indeed we use the same approach, but for making an antenna which works with two frequencies. So on one frequency you have a beam, on the other frequency you have another beam, and with a good efficiency for the two beams. And you do it just superimposing the two holography and making the analysis we have seen before. And for one of that, you get this result for antenna 32 gigahertz and 26.15 gigahertz. So these frequencies are something that works in data bank of Satcom. And actually, this is the strange holography you can get. There is some lot of lobes that is a little bit out of our control, and this again depends on the -2 mode. So, because at this large distance, one -2 mode goes into get influence on the other frequency, and this is something that we have not yet overcome. It is a difficulty that we have tried to control. Another interesting story is about the dual pole. Dual pole means that dual mode, so you should go into the simultaneous excitation of the first TM mode and the dominant TM mode and the first TM mode. The trick is to get an average impedance whose product is equal to Z square, or product of the reactance minus Z square. Z is the 377 ohm. So this product here should be like that in the average, and this could be done in a larger as possible range of frequency, and actually this can be done by using these element ellipses with a cross slot, and one of the arm of the slot regulate the T, the other one the TM, and you can control better the two phase velocity, and you lock this two phase velocity in a certain bandwidth, and actually provided to have a good feed. This was designed by Amadoia Telekea in the UPNA. This was the final antenna. The results are quite nice. Unfortunately, the object efficiency is 33%, and the antenna efficiency is 24%, but it works for drop hole. So this technique is good. The bandwidth is not very well controllable. The aperture efficiency is probably controllable, but it is a critical design, very, very difficult design. The same trick about the product of the two impedance equal to -Z square can be also used in order to emulate the corrugated horn by using a very, very thin surfaces. So these are the elements that you can use over the surface. This is the construction. It's a very thin layer which is planar, and next is just rounded inside the conical walls. So this is done by MVG. The realization was done by MVG. The design is done by us, with an optimization done by the body revolution code. We have another code about body revolution in order to design it, and actually we get some preliminary results a couple of years ago that was not good, and was not sufficient in terms of the cross pole. You know, when you would like to design a corrugated horn, you need as low as possible to do it, because you need a very, very pure polarization. So the cross pole should be less than, let us say, -25 dB at least. Here it is good in part of the bandwidth, but only no overall bandwidth. There was a setup from 11 to 12 to 0.2, and actually European Space Agency was not accomplished about the optimization, so we came back to the theory. So we studied just the conical modes into an infinite structure, and we discovered a very old paper by Peter Claricos that actually discovered one of the modes of the conical impedance surface, thank you much, that gets into a very good separation of the dispersion equation, and again using these, but with a component of the tensor which is going like 1/r and the other one as r, where r is the distance with respect to the vertex of the cone. If you do like that and you respect this condition, actually you have a perfectly polarized mode. So we have trying to replicate these conditions by using these impedance, local periodic problems, by using a local K vector and synthesize the element in this way. The difficulty that we have found in doing that is that you need to make a triangular grid. Otherwise, there is a sort of phase rumor that, let us say, deteriorate the performance a lot. But if you get this triangular mesh, local triangular mesh, in order to extract it, you can simulate the structure and you get a very good performance in terms of crossfall. These are some results. This is the realization. And the new measurement was actually very good. So minus 25 dB of crossfall. And this is something that never happens so easily. And this is just replicating the clerical mode, not making any optimization. When we did the optimization, we got worse results. So we came back to the theory and we get better results than before. I don't know if starting with this point we can improve also afterward. Another thing is about tilting the beam. This is very useful for peak reflector in order to render. Sometimes you need to focus in one point by using this configuration of horns, but you can do it flat with obvious mechanical advantages, just tilting the beam. And this tilt could be done by using 3 layers, so a bi-isotropic metasurface. These 3 layers are constructed by particular type of structure that goes gradually from inductive to capacitive without any jump. And this is a critical point. You should do it very regularly. If you jump, you encounter some phase mistake, and this is a final measurement that gets 7 degrees, no, 15 degrees, sorry, of shifting, and also increase the directivity. So we also compensate a little bit the phase, like a horn, a lens in the horn. So tilting and compensating the phase. So now, for the last 2 minutes, I would like to show some work about beam scanning. Beam scanning is divided in beam hopping and agility, and this normally requires a very fast switching, or if you would like to just moving the beam gradually in order to make a slow tracking, for example, satellite tracking from the Earth, you can also accomplish the time of reconfigurability of the order of milliseconds, while here you do nanoseconds. So in this time of variation are compatible with liquid crystal technology. You know, liquid crystal have been constructed by CD. So for the optics, when you move it in the frequency, in the microwave range, actually you encounter a lot of difficulties, but you can actually have the benefits that you can change the epsilon r, and this change of epsilon r change the phase velocity of the surface wave, so it changes wavelength, and you can create a scan also with a fixed periodicity. So you get a fixed periodicity, you change the epsilon r by simple continuous voltage change, so with only one parameter, and with this you make the scanning. And we have tried to propose this to European Space Agency with this particular structure in which you have a slab, and on the top of the slab you have a metasurface, which is actually get different isofrequency dispersion curves where you change the frequency over a different orientation. And the metasurface allows to let us say, moving the characteristic frequencies of the surface wave from 500 gigahertz, that is constitutive of the liquid crystal itself, into a micro range. So you should use it, otherwise you cannot design it as microwaves. And with this, different orientation of the molecule of the liquid crystal get different modulation of the frequency dispersion curves, and this gets, sorry, I'm going back. And if you introduce a modulation like that, you can scan it. This is what I mentioned before. And these are numerical results that done by one dimension. It's not 3 dimensions, it's 1 dimension, and you can get a different scan by using different voltage. The beauty of this is that you use only one voltage gap, and we realize it by using a multi-step structure in which you get a horn, and the horn getting a sieve technology reflection. The reflection get a plane wave, the plane wave coupled on the top floor, and you have a metal surface on top, and in between this layer and this you have a liquid crystal and the biasing, and you get actually first the measurement of the dielectric constant and the tangent loss in order to see which is the range of variability of the dielectric, and you see that this variability at a mean here around the 5 volt, and when you get the antenna, this is the fixed frequency, no biasing, and here you get the variation from 0 to 50 volt, and you see that due to this phenomenon of the mean, you have a appreciable change of 7 degrees from changing from 0 to 10 volt, and if you increase more, you don't change anymore. So this is compatible with a variation of the beams around 7 degrees, 8 degrees. That is completely out from what the European Space Agency asked us. Actually, asked much more, 20 degrees. This is the maximum that we did, and okay, I think that I finish here. And I would like just to emphasize the fact that this type of antenna is starting to become competitive with other technology. The reconfigurability is still a problem, but what I suggest is probably to into the switch more than into the liquid crystal with the continuous value. The beauty of liquid crystal is that you can use only one parameter for making the vertical scan, and this is quite useful and important. But I mean, if you would like please the capability, you should go into the switches. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention.
A beautiful pizza, by the way. I have a basic question. You approach these mathematics in the perspective of a surface impedance. And the surface impedance is a 2x2 tensor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in contrast to susceptibility approaches where you have 3x3 tensors, are you not missing opportunities in normal polarization currents and then in functionalities in your application at the end of the day?
Yes, yes. But this is a very good question. Actually, since we use always the background plane, what we notice is if you make a bianisotropic layer over ground plane, actually you don't gain much because the tangential field are always 2x2. So actually, maybe that you can increase the bandwidth, for instance, for a single approach. This may be a possibility, but it's not so important when you go into the transmission. For the transmission is fundamental. That I agree perfectly. Yes, yes. For dual mode also. For dual mode should be very interesting. Yes, but for dual mode you have a lot of other problems. The problems for dual mode is that you can match the frequency in one direction. When you go in the other direction, there's mismatch. So this is the main problem. Thank you much. Filippo.
Thank you for this beautiful presentation. It was fantastic. And also stressing the importance of understanding theory and separation of liquids. But my question is, I'm very impressed by this 4G antenna again. I know what it means. Very impressed. What kind of I guess rigidity must be a very important part. So what kind of substrate have you used in that case?
This is a very important question. Actually, one of the basic facts is that whenever you would like to use, it's much easier to design the antenna higher permittivity, like 9.8. But if you do it and you buy the substrate exhibits a small anisotropy. And this anisotropy affects the performance when you go at this level. This is a big problem. The second one is that lowering the epsilon r mitigate this factor of the anisotropy of the substrate and mostly increase the bandwidth. So, but the problem of a lower substrate is the element becomes a little bit larger because the dielectric is less. So if the elements become larger, you have less sampling of the continuous. So the homogenization approach is a little bit less valid. So you should change the elements in order to load more. But when you change the element, for instance, from the ellipses into the double anchor, you can get very accurate into the realization because the tolerances are played fundamental role. So there are several things that we have overcome and learned gradually. But at the end, the last substrate was epsilon equal to 3 for the 40 dB antenna, and the thickness was 1 millimeter and 30 gigahertz.
And how do you compare these two other kind of similar liquid antennas, like the radio line, solid antenna, that can be fully metal, very rigid and safe?
Yes, that's good. Good question. The problem of the antenna with the LSA is that the elements are resonant. So you have an additional restriction on bandwidth. But you don't have it because the elements are sub-resonant. Normally, this works with a larger bandwidth with respect to the LSA. The LSA has the ability to be also without any dielectric inside. This is good. Could be an advantage at very high frequency. That could be counterbalanced by the only metal structure that I showed before, which is actually more usable at higher frequency. But there is another problem for the RLSA, which is actually the higher order mode are much less controllable with respect to this. When you get into shaping the forget RLSA. While here you can do it, shape it being like that.
Any other question?
Yeah, very good question. The question was, you got with this liquid crystal structure 7 degrees of shifted beam. It was the first attempt, actually. It's not sufficient at all. No good. I agree. In most of the application, the space for improving there is. Several companies are looking at perfectionated liquid crystal, not in the optical region, but in the microwave. Merck, for instance, is a big provider of substrate for liquid crystal in liquid crystal display to Samsung. And they are looking at the microwave frequency now. There was a nice presentation last IAP symposium. And if you get into the problem losses, the problem of speed, and the problem of sensitivity, that now is almost nothing. You can go from 2.5 to 3.3, that's it. And you cannot do much. What you can do is lowering the strain. So if you use let us say, to 1 micron of liquid crystal or 100 micron, you get a more sensitivity. But the problem that you decrease the bandwidth, and your instantaneous bandwidth becomes difficult to control. So 7 degrees is compatible with the instantaneous bandwidth compensation, which is another issue there. Thank you for this question.
We will come for one last question, maybe? Okay.
So much for the presentation. You mentioned that some of the designs were space qualified. What are you thinking about the overall configuration?
Very, very good question. We tried to make the qualification, frankly speaking, for the dielectric by using grounding. But one of the most important problems is the grounding, because but the grounding is very easy when you get the slots, not easy when you get a patch, but patch are made better than the slots from design point of view. So the grounding was the main issue. So at the end, we go into the qualification of only metal, while we are trying still to get into the qualification of the dielectric structure because of this problem of the grounding.
Okay, so let's thank again Stefano for his very inspiring talk.